The Battle of Gettysburg, etched in the annals of American history, stands as a grim testament to the horrors of war and the human cost borne by those who fought in it. In July of 1863, the peaceful fields of Pennsylvania transformed into a hellish battleground, where the thunderous roar of cannon fire and the relentless storm of bullets reigned supreme. Soldiers, hardened yet terrified, plunged into the maelstrom of chaos, where the visceral clash of steel met the cries of the wounded, and every moment was a desperate struggle for survival. The brutality of this conflict not only marked a pivotal point in the American Civil War, but also resulted in an unfathomable toll of suffering and devastation. General George Meade's Union Army, composed of approximately 93,000 determined men, faced off against General Robert E. Lee's formidable Confederate forces, numbering around 71,000. The confrontation unleashed a torrent of bloodshed that would forever haunt the pages of history. With hearts pounding and the scent of gunpowder thick in the air, the soldiers pressed forward, only to confront the staggering reality of their sacrifices. A harrowing 3,155 Union soldiers lost their lives, while 14,529 were wounded and 5,365 went missing, leaving families shattered and futures obliterated. The Confederate Army, too, bore the weight of this devastating clash, with over 3,903 soldiers killed and 18,735 wounded, the echoes of their pain resonating through the valleys and hills that witnessed their final stand. The total casualty count was staggering. A staggering 51,000 brave souls rendered lifeless, wounded, or lost amidst the chaos. As the Gettysburg campaign unfolded, the somber toll climbed even higher, reaching an estimated 64,000 casualties across both sides. The scale of this devastation was almost too horrific to comprehend, as the land became a macabre tableau of agony and despair. Amid the chaos, makeshift field hospitals struggled to cope with the overwhelming influx of casualties. Medical supplies dwindled as surgeons, driven by an unwavering commitment to save lives, worked tirelessly, often without the luxury of anesthesia. The cries of the suffering mingled with the sounds of battle as they fought against time to mend broken bodies. The aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg painted a grim picture, a scene of unimaginable horror where the earth was littered not only with fallen heroes, but also with severed limbs and the remnants of shattered lives. Amputation became a common fate for many, a brutal necessity in the face of devastating injuries inflicted by artillery shells and musket fire. The grim reality of this battlefield was laid bare at field hospitals near Gettysburg, where piles of severed limbs testified to the ruthless cost of conflict, a stark reminder of the brutality that defined this chapter of American history. Among the countless tales of tragedy, the story of Elizabeth Thorne emerges as a poignant reminder of the human spirit's resilience in the face of despair. As the wife of the town's largest cemetery owner, Elizabeth found herself in a nightmarish scenario. Despite her own pregnancy, she took it upon herself to dig over 100 graves, a testament to the staggering number of lives lost. The fallen, including brave Confederate soldiers, were laid to rest in hastily dug graves, their stories intertwined with the soil of Gettysburg. In the shadows of war, there were also tales of women who defied societal norms to fight for their beliefs. One such woman disguised herself as a man and fought valiantly for the Confederacy, her body discovered on Cemetery Ridge, serving as a haunting reminder of the sacrifices made by women who dared to break free from the constraints of their time. Another woman, also in disguise, endured the horrors of war, losing her leg during a charge up Cemetery Ridge. The aftermath of the battle left a scene of utter devastation. Soldiers lay in the mud, many with nothing beneath them but the cold earth. Countless amputations left men with stumps resting directly on the ground, their suffering compounded by a lack of clothing and food. In the chaotic wake of Gettysburg, the situation for the wounded soldiers grew increasingly dire. With no proper shelter, many lay exposed to the elements, filthy and nearly naked, their cries for help echoing through the desolation. The landscape became a haunting tableau of despair as a powerful thunderstorm swept through, drenching the injured and threatening to drown those already in agony. The grim descriptions paint a harrowing picture of suffering, underscoring the dire lack of essentials, bedding, clothing, food, and shelter that compounded their misery. Despite the tireless efforts of overworked doctors and volunteers, the conditions remained atrocious. Union and Confederate soldiers alike faced a lethal combination of 19th century medical practices and the devastating impact of explosive artillery rounds and mini balls, designed for maximum lethality. These mini balls wreaked havoc on the human body, causing grotesque injuries that would haunt both the survivors and the families left behind. More than two-thirds of the gunshot wounds inflicted during this brutal conflict were to the arms and legs, resulting in catastrophic damage that was both horrifying and tragic. The nature of these injuries was nothing short of ghastly. When a mini ball struck, it often created a relatively small entrance wound, masking the true extent of the damage lurking beneath the surface. However, as the soft lead bullet exited the body, it tore through flesh and bone, leaving a much larger exit wound in its wake. The soft lead's tendency to flatten or fragment upon impact further exacerbated the horrors, as it introduced dirt, clothing fibers, and foreign materials into the wounds, significantly increasing the risk of infection. The battlefield was not only a site of immediate death and destruction, but also a breeding ground for infections that would claim countless lives long after the initial injuries were sustained. The medical knowledge of the time was painfully limited, and sterile techniques were largely unknown. Many soldiers who initially survived the trauma of battle ultimately succumbed to infections such as gangrene, a cruel twist of fate that left families grieving not just for their lost loved ones, but also for the unimaginable suffering they endured. The harrowing account of Private Jacob Henry Cole of the 57th New York Infantry brings the brutality of the battlefield into sharp focus. As he recounts the moment a bullet tore through his right arm, the vivid imagery of chaos unfolds. A bullet entered my right arm and went through it as we pushed forward. He recalls the horror of his comrades falling around him etched into his memory. A shell detonated as we charged into the wheat field, killing two of my companions and shattering my right leg. In those moments of sheer terror, the confusion and shock were palpable. Cole's numbness, akin to the sensation of being struck on the elbow, soon gave way to a dawning horror as he realized the severity of his injuries. His shattered leg and the immediate loss of comrades painted a brutal picture of the chaos that defined the battle. The chaos was not merely a backdrop. It was an ever-present force that twisted the very fabric of reality for those ensnared within it. As soldiers grappled with their injuries and the loss of their friends, the battlefield became a grim theater of human resilience and despair. The cries of the wounded and dying echoed in the air, creating a haunting symphony of suffering that would linger long after the smoke of battle had cleared. As we delve deeper into the aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg, we are confronted with a stark reality. The war was not solely fought on the battlefield. It continued in the hearts and minds of those who survived. The memories of pain and loss would become indelibly etched into the consciousness of a nation grappling with its identity. The stories of bravery, sacrifice, and tragedy from this pivotal moment in history serve as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war. The Battle of Gettysburg remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity, a chapter of history that calls for reflection and remembrance. The true cost of Gettysburg, paid in blood and sacrifice, echoes through the ages, reminding us of the price of freedom and the enduring legacy of those who fought for it. As we remember this harrowing chapter in American history, we honor not just the fallen soldiers, but also the indomitable spirit of a nation that emerged from the ashes of war, forever changed yet resolute in its pursuit of unity and peace. The Battle of Gettysburg was not merely a clash of armies. It became a crucible of human suffering and resilience, marked by the inadequacies of contemporary medical treatment that compounded the horrific injuries sustained by the soldiers. The sheer volume of casualties created an overwhelming burden on medical personnel, who found themselves performing a staggering number of amputations, often under appalling, unsanitary conditions. This grim reality was not merely a tragic necessity. It revealed a dire situation where the high rate of amputations was essential to save lives, yet simultaneously exposed soldiers to even greater risks of infection and untimely death. In the wake of Gettysburg, surgeons faced monumental challenges as they navigated the gruesome task of treating countless wounded soldiers. Among the array of surgical procedures they employed, excision, a grueling operation to remove broken pieces of bone, was fraught with peril, boasting even higher mortality rates than amputations themselves. The speed at which these operations had to be performed was astounding, with some soldiers undergoing amputations every 10 minutes, particularly during the dark hours of night, as surgeons fought against time to save as many lives as possible. The urgency was palpable. So many soldiers lay grievously injured that swift action was imperative. For those suffering from less severe injuries, doctors relied on basic treatments that seemed pitiful compared to the magnitude of the suffering around them. Wounds were hastily packed with lint and wrapped in damp bandages, and if time permitted, foreign objects were extracted from the gaping wounds. Yet for the gravely injured, those with wounds to the head, neck, chest, and abdomen, attention was scarce. The limitations of medical knowledge and technology meant that there was often little that could be done. Many of these patients, rather than receiving effective treatment, were given mere pain relief and left to succumb to their injuries. One poignant account captures the grim reality faced by many wounded soldiers. "I was wounded in my left arm during a fight near Gettysburg on Friday afternoon," one soldier recalled. "A musket shot broke my arm above the elbow. When I got to the hospital on Saturday the 4th, doctors amputated my arm that afternoon." His description of the operation, performed while under chloroform, allowing him to feel nothing during the surgery, belied the excruciating pain he would endure in the days that followed. Despite the hardships, he maintained a sense of hope, demonstrating a resilience that was often the only armor against despair. The constant and often grueling work of the surgeons, the basic care administered for minor wounds, and the tragic neglect of severe cases collectively underscore the profound difficulties inherent in Civil War medicine. The nature of injuries sustained during this brutal conflict was horrifying, particularly those inflicted upon the face. High-velocity bullets and explosive shell fragments wreaked havoc on soldiers' facial features, shattering bones and leaving grotesque disfigurements in their wake. The complex anatomy of the face, comprised of numerous bones, muscles, and nerves, made such injuries especially devastating. Broken jaws, shattered cheekbones, and the loss of eyes, noses, and parts of the scalp were all too common, exacerbated by the filthy conditions of the battlefield and the absence of advanced medical care, leading to rampant infections and prolonged suffering. For those fortunate enough to survive, the long-term consequences of their injuries were staggering. Beyond the physical pain and potential disability, many soldiers grappled with profound psychological and social ramifications. In a society where appearance was paramount for social interactions and personal dignity, facial disfigurement often resulted in severe isolation and stigma. Many injured soldiers retreated from public life, shunning social gatherings to avoid the pitying or judgmental glances of others. While reconstructive surgery was in its infancy during the Civil War, some surgeons began developing techniques that would later serve as the foundation for modern plastic surgery. However, these early methods were rudimentary at best, often leaving soldiers with unsightly scars and visible reminders of their trauma. It was not until years later that significant advancements in reconstructive techniques emerged, but for countless veterans, these innovations came too late to benefit them. Private Joseph Harvey's harrowing experience, marked by a catastrophic shell wound rather than a bullet, epitomizes the brutal nature of facial injuries sustained during the Battle of Gettysburg. As he recounted the moment he was struck, the imagery was vivid and visceral. "It felt like the floodgates in my neck opened, releasing a torrent of blood," he recalled. "It seemed like I had a chicken bone in my mouth, something loosely resting on my left cheek." It was part of my jaw that was floating around in my mouth after it broke. Off, teeth and all. Captured by enemy forces, Harvey endured the indignity of being held prisoner for 11 days before finally receiving medical attention at Alexandria's Mansion House Hospital in mid-July 1863. In August, surgeons would painstakingly remove the shattered fragments of bone. Yet the extensive damage to his cheek left him with a wound that leaked liquids and saliva, and he was left with partial facial paralysis on the right side and mild deafness. Despite the severe nature of his injuries, Harvey was granted a pension for his service, a small comfort amidst the tragic reality of his circumstances. Tragically, he succumbed to unknown causes on December 9, 1868, a haunting end for a life forever altered by the horrors of war. Among the most fearsome and insidious consequences of the injuries sustained during the Battle of Gettysburg was the specter of infection. The prevailing medical knowledge of the mid-19th century was woefully inadequate, as the understanding of germ theory was non-existent. Instead, the medical community operated under the misguided belief that miasmas, or bad air, were the primary cause of disease. Consequently, the medical practices of the time often unwittingly exacerbated the spread of infection. Surgeons, operating with unwashed hands and using unsterilized instruments, contributed to a perfect storm for infections to thrive in the chaotic and overcrowded conditions of wartime field hospitals. As we reflect on the Battle of Gettysburg and the immense suffering it wrought, we are confronted with the chilling reality that war does not simply end with a battlefield victory or defeat. The echoes of anguish and resilience resonate long after the guns fall silent, leaving behind a legacy of pain that permeates the lives of those who survived. The stories of soldiers, both in their physical and emotional scars, speak to a truth that transcends the annals of history, a reminder of the profound cost of conflict and the enduring spirit of those who endured it. One of the most insidious foes on the blood-soaked fields of Gettysburg was not the enemy with bayonet and musket, but the relentless specter of infection that lurked in every wound and shadowed every soldier. Among these unseen assailants, gangrene was perhaps the most dreaded. This ghastly condition, where body tissue decays due to a catastrophic loss of blood supply, often worsened by bacterial invasion, claimed countless lives. Wounded soldiers watched in horror as their flesh blackened and withered, the stench of decay a grim harbinger of their fate. The swift and merciless progression of gangrene left medical staff with harrowing choices, often resorting to amputations in a desperate bid to halt its relentless march toward vital organs. Yet, even the saw and scalpel could not always outpace the infection, and many succumbed despite these drastic measures. Another silent killer stalking the wounded was sepsis, a systemic eruption of infection that could swiftly lead to organ failure and death. Soldiers burning with fever, their hearts pounding like war drums, struggled for breath as confusion clouded their minds. With limited understanding and scarce remedies, once sepsis took hold, survival became a distant hope fading into the haze of suffering. Tetanus, ominously known as lockjaw, crept in through the smallest of wounds. The bacteria, seizing upon any breach in the body's defenses, unleashed a torment of muscle stiffness and violent spasms. Victims found their jaws clenched tight, backs arched in agonizing contortions, fists locked as if still grasping for their rifles. The mortality rate was devastatingly high, each case a testament to the peril that even minor injuries posed in an era bereft of effective treatments. The toll exacted by infection was staggering, a grim arithmetic where for every soldier felled in battle, disease claimed 2 or 3 more. The battlefields and makeshift hospitals became breeding grounds for death, the suffering extending far beyond the clash of arms. Survivors of initial injuries often faced prolonged battles against chronic pain, disability, and recurring infections that haunted them long after the cannons fell silent. The specter of disease loomed large over the Civil War, and at Gettysburg, it cast a particularly long and dark shadow. It is a chilling reality that illnesses such as diarrheal diseases, smallpox, malaria, and yellow fever claimed more lives than the enemy's bullets and bayonets. Soldiers often fell ill before ever stepping onto the battlefield, their bodies weakened by the unsanitary conditions of overcrowded camps. Contaminated water and spoiled food led to rampant outbreaks of diarrhea, leaving men dehydrated and debilitated, sometimes fatally so. Smallpox, a relentless and highly contagious scourge, swept through ranks indiscriminately, leaving death or disfigurement in its wake. The pox-marked faces of survivors bore silent witness to the unseen battles waged within their bodies. Malaria and yellow fever lurked in the swamps and marshes, the buzzing of mosquitoes a deadly prelude to fever chills and incapacitating weakness. These diseases struck without warning, felling soldiers who might otherwise have stood strong against the enemy. The stagnant waters that lined the battlefields were more than obstacles. They were breeding grounds for vectors of disease that did not discriminate between blue and gray. In the grim aftermath of Gettysburg, soldiers grappled not only with physical wounds, but with invisible scars etched deep into their minds. The mental toll of war was a heavy burden, an unspoken torment that shadowed their every step. Amid the smoke and chaos of battle, fear and stress hammered at their psyches, forging unseen wounds that would fester long after the guns grew silent. Many were haunted by relentless nightmares, the echoes of artillery and the screams of the dying replaying endlessly in the theater of their minds. They lived in constant dread, unable to escape the horrors they had witnessed, trapped in a relentless cycle of terror and memory. What we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder was a silent plague among these veterans. Yet in that era, there was little understanding or compassion for such afflictions. Seeking help was often stigmatized, viewed as a weakness unbecoming of a soldier. Thus many suffered in silence, their internal battles invisible to those around them. The overwhelmed field hospitals, already straining under the weight of physical injuries, had neither the time nor the resources to tend to wounds of the mind. The psychological casualties of Gettysburg were left to navigate their torment alone, adrift in a world that could not comprehend their pain. The struggle did not end with the war. Returning home, many veterans found themselves estranged from the lives they had once known. The lingering effects of trauma manifested in myriad ways. Substance abuse became a common escape, a numbing balm for unhealed wounds. Homelessness ensued for some, as they were unable to reintegrate into a society that had no place for the shattered remnants of their former selves. Suicide claimed others, the final refuge from a world that offered no solace. It would be many years before the mental anguish of these soldiers was acknowledged, and even longer before effective treatments were developed. Advancements in psychiatry eventually shed light on the profound impact of trauma, validating the experiences of those who had suffered in silence. The stories of Gettysburg's veterans became a somber reminder of the unseen costs of war, prompting future generations to consider not just the physical, but the psychological ramifications of conflict. The true horror of Gettysburg extends beyond the physical carnage. It serves as a stark wake-up call to the terrible price paid by those who serve in war. It underscores the necessity of compassion, understanding, and support for the warriors who bear not just the wounds we can see, but those hidden within. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, we are compelled to acknowledge the profound sacrifices made by these soldiers. The battlefield was a crucible that tested the limits of human endurance, both physically and mentally. The legacy of Gettysburg is etched not only in the annals of history, but in the collective consciousness as a symbol of courage, suffering, and the indomitable spirit of those who endured its horrors. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. The tales of infection and disease, of mental anguish and invisible wounds, are integral threads in the fabric of Gettysburg's story. They remind us that war is not a distant, romanticized endeavor, but a brutal reality that leaves deep and lasting scars. The lessons learned from the suffering at Gettysburg have shaped modern approaches to medicine, mental health, and the way we care for those who have borne the battle. They serve as a solemn reminder of the costs of conflict and the imperative to strive for peace. The stories of gangrene's relentless advance, of sepsis stealing life away in a fevered haze, of tetanus locking bodies in final, agonized poses, are stark illustrations of the medical challenges of the time. The sight of soldiers reduced to shadows of themselves by disease and infection underscores the limitations faced by medical practitioners, who battled valiantly against forces they scarcely understood. Their struggles paved the way for medical advancements, driven by the desperate need to alleviate suffering and save lives. The acknowledgement of mental trauma, long overlooked, has become a critical aspect of veteran care. The haunted eyes of soldiers who walked away from Gettysburg bore silent testimony to battles waged within. Their experiences have informed modern understandings of trauma, leading to better support systems and interventions for those who serve. The path from stigma to support has been a long one, marked by the silent courage of those who suffered unseen. In remembering Gettysburg, we honor not just the strategic and historical significance of the battle, but the individual lives that were irrevocably changed. The echoes of their pain and perseverance resonate through time, a clarion call to remember the human cost behind the dates and statistics. Their sacrifices compel us to look beyond the surface, to understand the depth of their experiences, and to ensure that such suffering is neither forgotten nor repeated without heed. The true horror of Gettysburg lies not only in the bloody engagements and the staggering loss of life, but in the enduring aftermath, the physical and psychological scars carried by survivors, the grieving families, the societal challenges that followed. It is a chapter of history that demands reflection, a somber narrative that underscores the need for empathy, for better care for those who serve, and for a continual pursuit of peace. As we conclude this reflection on the harrowing realities faced by the soldiers of Gettysburg, we are reminded of the profound impact that history holds over the present and future. The lessons gleaned from their suffering are invaluable, guiding principles that shape our approach to medicine, mental health, and humanity. Let their stories serve as a beacon, illuminating the path toward a more compassionate and understanding world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most pivotal and poignant moments in history. We hope that this exploration has shed light on the immense sacrifices made and the enduring lessons learned. If you found this account meaningful, please give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more in-depth explorations of history's most significant events. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. Thanks for watching.